Hi, everyone, and welcome back. For those of you who missed the opening keynote, I'm Jasmine Emberg, Principal Analyst at Insider Intelligence. Thank you so much for joining us for today's closing keynote, Is Seattle, Not Silicon Valley, the Future of Digital Advertising? I'm joined by my colleague, Andrew Lipsman, Principal Analyst in Chicago. But before we get into it, just a quick reminder, we will be answering your questions at the Ask the Analyst panel right after Andrew's presentation. So there's still plenty of time for you to participate. You can drop your questions in the chat box. And now, over to you, Andrew.
Thanks so much, Jasmine. So as you mentioned, the title of this presentation is Seattle, Not Silicon Valley, the Future of Digital Advertising? Designed to be a little bit provocative, but in service of a point which I hope to lay out for all of you over the course of the next 30 minutes. So we're at a pretty interesting juncture in the evolution of digital advertising. For so long, it was the dominance of the duopoly. Google and Meta together collectively had well over 50% of the digital ad market. But what we've seen in recent years is that they've begun to experience a bit of disruption, dropping below 50% of the market recently as we've had the emergence of a lot of new players coming up. And I've grouped, well, first off, to the right, you kind of see how they are clustered, some of the companies. I'll unpack them a bit in a minute, but I've clustered them into some of the top retail media players. That's red in this area chart. Big tech players, that's Apple and Microsoft, and then streaming players. And I'm kind of using a broad definition here. These are kind of video and audio type of advertising companies. And collectively, you can see that they have carved out a pretty meaningful share of the digital advertising market, especially in recent years. So here's a more close-up view of some of these players and their growth rates, their forecasted growth rates this next year. So I'll walk you through, again, they're color-coded in red, blue, and black. The top players in terms of expected growth rate are Instacart and Walmart. Top retail media players who are, their businesses are on fire. Got Apple, TikTok, Spotify, Amazon expected to grow about 17%, Hulu, Microsoft, Roku, and then Meta and Google expected to grow basically low single digits this year. So I do want to point out Amazon in particular. So it's in the middle of the pack here percentage-wise, but that's off of a actually very large base at this point as the number 3 player overall in digital advertising. We expect Amazon to grow about $5 billion in the US in net new ad revenue, surpassing the $3.3 billion of Meta and Google combined, just to put things in a bit of context. So I see this as sort of a race shaping up, a battle of sorts with a lot of other players, but at the center of it is the big 3. We'll call them Meta, Google, and Amazon. And the way I've looked at this over the years is that if you want to sort of dominate the digital landscape, you've got to win or be a clear leader on the 3 core pillars: media, advertising, and commerce. Now, we can assign each of these players to one of these areas where I think they perform the best. Google obviously built kind of the first really revolutionary digital ad machine. Meta with Facebook and Instagram have really the biggest media assets out there in digital today. And of course, Amazon, as by far the largest e-commerce player, locked down that commerce pillar. Now, over time, you would expect them to try and get into each other's territory a bit and evolve their capabilities to try and lock down the other pillars. And we've certainly seen that. Google has shifted into media through YouTube primarily, a huge media asset. Meta obviously built a real performance advertising machine, very similar to what Google did years before. So those 2 really are extremely strong on media and ads. Amazon kind of sat there for a long time doing commerce and maybe behind the scenes building up a few little assets on the media and advertising side of things, but it kind of went unnoticed. Google and Meta, meanwhile, really tried to move into commerce. Google building out Google Shopping and different shopping capabilities, marketplaces, and things of that nature. Meta had Instagram Checkout and some other capabilities. So they've certainly dabbled, but never really figured it out in a significant way. But Amazon did start to make some inroads into media and advertising. So I'll talk a little bit about that in just a bit. So that's the backdrop for what I think of as the future of digital advertising. And And I started to think about this a lot last year because I said, as Google and Meta start to lose a little bit of their grasp, what is that? Because they're still so strong in their core areas of search and display or social advertising. And really, it was because we were starting to see the emergence of these new forms of digital advertising that I thought, even though some of them are still somewhat small, they have a lot of potential. They will get big over time. So it's all about what it looks like going forward. So these are a few of the key areas that I was looking at. Off to the left, our expected growth rate this year for display and search, about 8%, right? So solid growth rates, but not high growth areas in the double digits. But there are 5 areas that I looked at that I said, these are really growth areas over the course of the next decade. Retail media and connected TV, we've talked about those a lot. They're really centerpieces of the future of digital advertising. But there are a couple of other areas that I think are also really promising and aren't talked about often enough. And that is gaming. High engagement medium, doesn't reach everybody, but it does reach a lot of people, and a chance to have more immersive experiences if advertising is well integrated into the experience. Digital audio. I think people just spend a lot of time listening to podcasts and music, and advertising is something that they're already accustomed to through radio. I just feel like that opportunity also has not been fully tapped. And the last one is digital out of home, and specifically with the rise of in-store media. This is an early trend, but one that I think is going to get very big and another high growth area to be thinking about. Let's talk about each of these a bit more. So I've talked about this one quite a bit. I'll try not to beat this horse too much, but digital advertising's third big wave is retail media, of course, led by Amazon. And we can see that, it's on its way to being just massive. And in comparison to search and social, it's monetizing much more quickly. Search took 14 years to get from 1 to 30 billion. Social, 11 years. Retail media, 5 years. And we're well beyond that. And we're going to be at about $45 billion this year. Nice big market. We expect it to grow to over 100 billion in the US by 2027. Connected TV. Now, this is a market that we expect this year to be about 25 billion, on its way to about 40 billion by 2027. And interestingly, it hasn't even tapped into what I think is going to be a really interesting, compelling opportunity, which is the combination of retail media and CTV, which is that you have the TV-like advertising experience with sight, sound, and motion, coupled with the closed-loop targeting and measurement powered by first-party retailer data. So you can reach more narrowly segmented audiences and then see whether or not those people were more likely to actually purchase more at a specific retailer. We expect this to be a big growth driver as we look out to the coming years of connected TV, but something that I think can really revolutionize how we think about premium TV-like advertising. Gaming. We had this discussion that started in late 2021 about the metaverse, and how the premise back then was that it was going to be the successor to the mobile internet, the next major advertising medium. And my thought was, even if we assume that this is going to be true in the long run, it's going to take us a while to get there. Why are we looking past gaming, immersive gaming environments? People are doing this today, and we have yet to really monetize or fully realize the opportunity of, having digital billboards in the context of a gaming environment, or having brands or stores in these realistic types of worlds. It actually adds to the experience for people who are gaming in these three-dimensional worlds. I mean, to me, that is clearly the predecessor of what the metaverse can and should be from an advertising standpoint, but that opportunity still has not been fully tapped. So gaming video content is the one I've highlighted here as a really critical growth driver. Digital audio. I think this is one of the most under-monetized formats in terms of ad revenue relative to time spent. And if you look here at digital audio, we can see that it's about 20% of digital time spent this year, but only about 7.5% of digital ad revenues. Podcasts, which is a subset of digital audio, about 5% of time spent and less than 1% of digital ad revenues. This harkens back to the old Mary Meeker chart for those who remember it, where she would show the disparity between mobile time spent and then, the low levels of mobile monetization, this going back, 10 years ago or so. I think there are a couple of ad markets that are in a similar place. And to me, I always look at this one for podcasting and think this is a place that really can be monetized much better. And this is me editorializing a bit. It's an effective advertising medium. I think it's a great way. It's a very intimate way to hear and learn and understand more about brands. Digital out of home. Now, this is a growth area without in-store retail media, but this is an area in particular as a segment of digital out of home that's going to grow to be really big. I've shared this chart before, but it basically shows in-store digital audiences for 13 leading brick and mortar retailers side by side with their digital audiences. So I mentioned that retail media was a $45 billion industry today. That's been built almost exclusively on their digital audiences. The in-store audiences for these retailers is on average in this cross-section, 70% bigger. So think about that in terms of the potential scale. When you look at some of the bigger ones, Walmart, Target, Walgreens, all the way to Lowe's, 50 million shopper audiences can be reached every single month in these stores. So a really, really significant opportunity. So this is the backdrop for me thinking about this rivalry, brewing rivalry between Seattle and Silicon Valley. And we've seen these new disruptors emerge. Now, I mentioned Amazon, but I started to think a bit more last year about Microsoft. I saw Microsoft doing a lot of interesting things in advertising. Again, much of it below the radar. And I thought that, Microsoft kind of was aligning themselves very well with some of these growth markets that I had just outlined. Amazon too had been doing that. So that was kind of my initial intuition. And at the same time, I started to think about Google and Meta and wondering, how well aligned are they? I mean, they just kill it in their respective markets, but are they aligned particularly well for the future of growth? And I didn't know the answer. Now, let me talk a little bit more about what I think is so compelling about some of these opportunities. So Amazon has built this new flywheel. I laid it out before: media, ads, and commerce. Those are kind of the three core pillars. And the initial assets for Amazon were Amazon.com, Amazon Ads, which they've built up into a nice business, and then Prime Video. They also have Alexa, which is itself an advertising medium. And they've built out different things in the way of video that I think have helped bolster their position in media. But the commerce and ads is pretty strong. The media is the one that's still evolving. Now, they're evolving it really quickly. They're using Amazon Prime at the center of all this, by the way. I think this is how they lock people into their ecosystem to drive all of these things. It's really kind of the focal point and the tether between the media, ads, and commerce. What they've done more recently is they've taken all of these pieces and they've kind of put them on steroids. From commerce, it's not just Amazon.com and e-commerce. They're moving into physical retail, which is still 85% of retail today. Amazon Fresh is the big ambition there because this is where large national consumer brands are going to be purchased. Advertising, they're moving into formats like Thursday Night Football to deliver streaming video advertising in a really high quality premium environment. Media assets, they're introducing Fire TVs that are integration points for Alexa using voice automation that allows you to maybe engage in shoppable ads at the same time that it is a central point for engaging in the different forms of media, whether that's Prime Video or Freevee, which Amazon has today. So they've started to build this really, really compelling flywheel. Now, Microsoft also has this really sneakily impressive constellation of digital ad assets, and they don't, I don't know, fit together perfectly if you think about them. They're a little bit disjointed, but they're all pretty strong in their own right, whether that's Bing for search, LinkedIn for display and social, Xbox and gaming, Xandr, a relatively recent acquisition for ad tech, and Promote IQ, which enables a lot of retail media. Now, what Microsoft has also done is lined up partnerships with a lot of key players in digital advertising's growth sectors. Most prominently, Netflix, a very recent one, which they're leveraging Xandr to deliver connected TV ads. So this is a huge piece into the CTV market for Microsoft, as is a partnership that they have with Roku. Retail media, they've got partnerships with Kroger, collaborating with Cooler Screens for in-store media, and then obviously, maybe most prominent of all, OpenAI for disrupting search through everything that we now know is happening with AI and different models for ChatGPT. So clearly Microsoft has been busy. It's doing a lot of things, but we haven't quite seen how all these things fit together cohesively, but they're up to a lot, and I would say align pretty well with growth. But wait, we have one other disruptor that we can't move past, and that actually comes from the ranks of Silicon Valley, and that is Apple. Already a very big company in their own right, but they've built out a lot of media assets that I think are very ripe for digital advertising opportunities. They haven't started to monetize a lot of them, or maybe minimally, but it's Apple TV Plus, it's Apple News, Apple Music, Apple Arcade, gaming, right? All these different kind of growth areas in media that we're talking about is what Apple is starting to get into and has the potential to introduce really compelling advertising experiences at scale. Oh, and by the way, they own the rails for iOS. So there's a lot that they can do just by having a really critical asset that can enable a lot of these advertising opportunities. They've also made privacy changes that has been very disruptive to digital ad markets already. Mobile app installs. So mobile app install ad revenue is a key piece of digital advertising for a lot of big tech, certainly for Meta and Facebook historically. And Apple, through these privacy changes, has actually increased its share and grown its digital ad business quite significantly over the last couple of years since those changes went into effect in 2021. It's come at the expense of both Google and Meta, most notably Meta, really kind of taking a bite out of one of their key strengths in digital advertising. So with all of this happening in the background, I basically started to do a back of the napkin analysis to see who really is the best position. I will say before I get into the details of this, it is in some sense subjective. I acknowledge that. You may feel free to differ on any of the rankings. It's imperfect, but it was a way of being able to understand and analyze who I felt like was best positioned. I'm going to take you through 2 points of doing this analysis. The first one was when I first did this last year in 2022. It is a smaller version of the analysis, so it strips away a lot of the necessary detail. I then subsequently built on this analysis with 2023. So I'm going to walk you through what I did in the results. So the first one is I ranked each of these 5 players according to the 5 markets that represented the future of digital advertising. And I gave them a subjective score from 1 to 5 in terms of how well positioned they were. 1 basically meant you're a laggard. There's no real discernible position they have in the market. 2, you might be dabbling a little bit, but don't really have traction yet. 3, you've got a position with some traction. 4, a pretty strong position. And then 5, you're a clear leader or dominant player in that market. And this is just an example to show how I scored it. Now, some of these markets are more important, so I assigned them a bigger weight. Retail media and CTV got larger weights. Gaming had sort of a middle weight at 20%. Audio and in-store, smaller weights. Again, you can feel free to disagree with the weights I provided, but this is how I tried to do this analysis. Then I came up with a weighted score, which you see at the bottom. That's an example. And here's how it netted out for the 5 players. Meta at 1.6, Google at 2.9, Amazon 4.0, Microsoft 3.4, and Apple there at 2.3. So this wasn't very favorable to Meta. In some sense, it was not particularly well aligned around a lot of these opportunities, like retail media in particular. Audio didn't have much to speak of. Amazon and Microsoft, though, as it turned out, did. They were pretty well aligned with a lot of these, if not all of these, and in pretty solid positions. So that really benefited their scores. Google still doing just fine, kind of in the middle of the pack, and then Apple may be coming up, to threatened slightly, but maybe not in a significant way. So this year, I thought, well, this space is getting shaken up even more. I mean, we've had a year that's passed, and a lot of these markets have emerged even more, retail media, CTV. There's a lot brewing that wasn't brewing a year ago. So we need to reevaluate some of these, and we need to rescore. As an example, Meta, which had nothing to speak of in retail media a year ago, just introduced new offerings in retail media. And they have a right to win a part of that market, because as retail media moves up the funnel into upper funnel environments, connecting that data to what Meta has to offer with Facebook and Instagram can be very compelling. And they have a lot to bear there. So some of the scores across different players improved over the course of this year. But I also said, we're seeing a lot of disruption in search and display. Like, how can I look past these markets? They too are the future of digital advertising. I can't just take the future markets that I'm outlining. I have to think about where these huge existing markets go from here. So search and display, I put into the mix as well, and they were assigned the largest weights. I downgraded the weights of the other ones, but in roughly similar proportions. But that wasn't enough. I said, it's not just about the markets you're playing in, it's also about what your assets are to realize the future of digital advertising. And so first-party data is a central asset. Attribution and measurement is a really critical core competency that attracts ad dollars. And some do it really, really well today. You can't discount that. We know everyone's talking about how AI and machine learning are going to disrupt the future of advertising. So that too is a battleground. So once again, I assigned weights here, and I decided that I was going to basically come up with two scores for each of them, one on kind of the ad markets and the other one on the capabilities. So the ad markets is the red bar, the capabilities is this black bar. And what you find at the end of the day here is that there's really a much more balanced view. Google has incredible assets, so it ends up scoring really high on a lot of these capabilities, while obviously being very well in the mix on a lot of the digital advertising fronts. Amazon, Microsoft also faring very well here. Apple, I think it gets underappreciated how important it is that they own these rails from an attribution standpoint. When they get into advertising in a much bigger way, they're going to be able to measure advertising in a way that few others can. Meta certainly takes a big jump up from where it was in the previous analysis in this view of the world as well. So where I netted out is that basically the future of digital advertising is a big jump ball between Seattle and Silicon Valley. I think things are about to get incredibly interesting. I can't wait to see where all of them go next. And I think it's going to be a really exciting next couple of years, and one that's clearly not going to be dominated just by a duopoly, but by a lot of players. And there's even more beyond these five that we haven't talked about in detail that are also going to become significant players in this space. So with that, I'm going to wrap up with 5 predictions on the future of digital advertising. And the first one is that Meta is going to make a play into search. I mentioned that they're very strong on display, but they're leaning into AI in a significant way. And they're nowhere to speak of in search, but search is starting to move and gravitate into social in some new ways. And Meta has to be thinking about it, especially as they think about what their ambitions are with AI. And I think they can leverage some of their unique assets with the social graph to make a much more significant play in the search market.
And Andrew, I'm going to jump in here and say that I completely agree with you. And this is something that I have been talking about really since the end of last year. For me, thinking about where Meta goes next, launching a search ad business seemed like a logical next step for really 3 reasons. And one is the rising threat of retail media, which you've spoken in detail about, that is causing it to have to innovate and come up with new solutions for advertisers. 2 is the rise of social search, which you just mentioned. There are so many people starting their searches, including for products, on social media at this point, and it would make sense for Meta to capitalize on that behavior. And then we saw Meta also shutting down many of its social commerce features. Most of those or at least deprioritizing them. And most of those were the more lower funnel features that it had rolled out during the pandemic, and pivoting its focus to more upper funnel activities like shoppable ads, because there's still a ton of shopping happening, of course, on Meta's platforms, even if people aren't transacting there. So there too, search ads made sense as a logical next step to continue capitalizing on that behavior. And I think you're right, AI is accelerating Meta's roadmap, and we've actually seen that Instagram is starting to test search ads, for example. So it's definitely happening. I think you're spot on with this prediction.
Yeah, and thinking about TikTok search, which you've written and spoken quite a bit about, right? This is the center of gravity for social, but in many ways, Meta's kind of chasing a lot of what TikTok is doing, and it's how a whole new generation is searching for a lot of things. So there's a lot of potential there. But I love your point also about the fact that Meta is taking a new approach on the commerce side of things, and search links directly to commerce in a pretty significant way. Google, I think, has a potential to really start to shake up retail media. They haven't been necessarily clear around this opportunity yet, but I think the centerpiece is YouTube. To me, it's all about the future being streaming TV plus closed loop measurement, and YouTube is the best channel for that. It already has a strong measurement closed loop apparatus around YouTube, but also YouTube TV is where a lot of streaming TV is going. It's the new cable bundle in a lot of respects. So I think that as YouTube becomes the centerpiece, Google's play in retail media gets a lot more compelling. Apple, they're going to go big in CTV. It's just a matter of time. I think it's about when they introduce advertising, it's got to be premium. It's got to be high quality. They're not just going to litter people with ads. And to me, the best environment to do that is sports. And I think that we have new NBA rights, which are going to get very, very expensive a couple of years from now. Who's got the deepest pockets to go after? It's going to be a bidding war, probably between Amazon and Apple and Google and maybe everyone else. But I think Apple is best positioned to win it. They want to win it, and I think they're going to win it and use that as a springboard for where they're going with CTV. Amazon continues to build out its CTV footprint. I think they're going to acquire a TV network, a major one, and more content, because the limiting factor for their advertising business right now is just having enough ad-supported inventory in video. And lastly, Microsoft. I think it would be smart for them to acquire Instacart. They want to continue to accelerate what they're doing in retail media, and specifically with in-store retail media, where Microsoft has been at the forefront. But Instacart with connected stores is also thinking about this. Importantly, they're sort of a neutral party here and being able to work with a lot of retailers in a way that Amazon can't do, because Amazon competes so directly. To me, this seems like the smart long-term play for Microsoft. With that, we're going to wrap it up. So thank you very much, and pass it back to you, Jasmine.
Thanks, Andrew. I can't wait to connect with you later on and see which of the predictions came true. But next up is our Ask the Analyst panel, featuring my colleagues Deborah Aho-Williamson, Sky Canaves, Jeremy Goldman, and Yuri Wormser. They will be taking your questions on ChatGPT and generative AI and anything else that you might have for them on marketing and advertising. Join them at 2:40 p.m. Eastern by clicking on the tab below the video that says Next Session. Thank you.